All right, let me look at a morning must-read. This analysis, Michael Rubin from Stan Collender. You know him with his minute analysis of process on fiscal affairs. The Trump 2018 budget clearly is designed to appeal to no one but the Trump base. No budget resolution would prevent the use of the no filibuster reconciliation rules for tax reform. It may make a much more moderate budget resolution with far fewer, as in almost none, spending cuts, the only way to move tax reform forward. Are we going to see a conventional budget, Michael?
I don't think we're going to see a conventional budget. What we are going, look, the Trump administration has thrown the traditional playbook out the window when it comes to the rules of this sort of thing. So what we are going to have is a much broader philosophical debate.
Yeah.
But also, let's face it, the congressional Republicans aren't necessarily going to extend their loyalty to President Trump endlessly, especially when he is so wounded on some of the security issues and some of the scandals that are brewing and percolating right now in Washington.
The percolating zeitgeist of the last 3 days is these are bad people. They need to go out and get a job. We got to go out and get a job. We got to get off this, get off that, and go get a job. How does that play in the Washington of 2017?
Well, it may not play so well in the Washington of 2017, but as you said, it is, Tom, going to play among certain segments of Trump's base. You know, I live in Washington, D.C., of course. I don't work in government, and there is something to be said when government shuts down, no one works, and yet they end up getting paid at the end of the day. For those in the private sector, that sort of logic is infuriating. However, people do, it's sort of like Congress. Everyone hates Congress broadly, but they want their congressmen to support them. Everyone hates government programs except for the one which they end up utilizing, and so that's the sort of problem that Trump is going to face.
All right, Michael, for our global audience, let me just frame what we're talking about. So we understand that this proposal would dramatically reduce U.S. government's role in society with $3.6 trillion in spending cuts over the next 10 years. This also budget would claim to balance it within a decade. Who would benefit from that? And again, it seems to me that actually it's Trump's base that has the most to lose. It's the weaker in society. It's the poor, the recent college graduates, and the farmers.
Well, Francine, this is the certain irony of the whole Trump issue. Now, when it comes to who benefits, what Trump is basically arguing as a businessman is you got to have a balanced budget if we're going to survive in the long term. But you're absolutely right. You know, Trump campaigned as a champion for the poor, and yet he's a billionaire. So you have this sort of irony percolating through the system. That's why I say, Francine, that the playbook is thrown out the window.
Right, but Michael, so you can have a billionaire that still takes care of his base, but does this budget mean that actually his base will revolt or his base will fall out of love with President Trump?
Well, ultimately, that's the question. I suspect what Trump is going to do is if, for example, in a hypothetical world, this reform plan was actually implemented, this budget plan was actually implemented, people love bashing the Congress, and Trump might do that down the line. But, you know, when you have a four-year presidency and you're presenting a 10-year budget, it's just unrealistic at the face.
What he's also proposing is severe cuts to foreign aid. Michael, does that weaken the U.S. position in world politics?
Well, you know, absolutely. It could, but let's also face it, the foreign aid is something that should be examined. When you have a lot of waste, though, you want to go after it with a scalpel. You don't want to go after it with an axe, and that's what President Trump is going to be accused of. Right now, what people are going to ask is how can you have the implementation of all these foreign programs when you haven't even appointed half the ambassadors you need to?